Well, welcome back, and hopefully time management, the myth, you found interesting. It's a different approach talking about time management, but I have to agree with some of the things. We can't make more time. We all have the same time in the same day. It's just really about not managing time, but managing ourselves, self-management. And to do that, we need to be self-aware, and that's what we've been talking about. It's not just about that urgency and importance. He talked about there being the significance of it as well. And then he talked about multipliers. What can I do now that will make more time tomorrow? And he talked about saying no. If we can say no to things today, then that'll save us and produce more time for tomorrow. He talked about the fact that if we can learn to say no, and it's not easy, it's not natural, but we can use some of those methods we've talked about to decide which bits we possibly can say no to. And I definitely would advocate that if you've been through the process of planning and thinking about it and prioritizing it, that you'll find it easier to say no because you genuinely feel it and you can justify it from within yourself. He said there about using planned procrastination. So procrastination, not a good thing, but if it's planned and we're using it to make a decision about something, then that's good. And then he finished by saying go forth and multiply. So be a time multiplier. Hopefully across this session so far you've picked up some things that you think you can try and improve and develop to improve your practices, and we're going to look now at how we can use those to develop personal development plans, identifying what we need to develop personally, thinking about it, reflecting and doing something about it, and then putting it in a personal development plan. So we'll look at that now. So the key is being reflective. It's about that reflection we do, but doing it with some purpose, looking at what we've done, what's happened, and then using it with some purpose to create something. Kolb's reflective cycle shows us what I'm talking about. It says there we experience something happens that we come across, or we see something new. We then reflect on it, we think about the impact it has had and how we felt about it. So when we were talking about self-awareness, we're talking about the impact we've had on others, how we felt about it, what our values were, what our perceptions were, how we thought it had an impact on things, and then conceptualizing it. So if it's something that we think we can use in a different situation, or we could fit in somewhere else in a different environment, we consider how we can incorporate it, how we could plan it and develop it. We then carry out that plan, so we basically test or apply our new theory, and then we see what experience we had from that. So Kolb's reflective cycle gives us a way of looking at how we could be reflective as part of our own self-awareness. So if you're not familiar with Kolb's reflective cycle, I'd urge you to do a bit more research, because it goes hand in hand with self-awareness, and it gives us that process to create a PDP, some purpose from our reflection. Our PDP is going to be an action plan based on what we've discovered, our awareness, the impact, and we can set some goals, plan our improvement for our effectiveness, our career, our education, our relationship, whatever. So creating a personal development plan is the outcome of a continuous cycle of reflection, action. So it's continuous improvement. You may ask why bother? Well, it helps us set short and long-term goals. We need some focus and direction to keep us on track. It allows us to learn about ourselves, be more self-aware, and recognize our strengths and areas we can improve, or areas that we can manage for our own benefit and for the benefit of others. For our emotions, for instance, it can provide that balance to stop some negativity, because we're talking here about improvements, things we can do to change things, and it can enable us to face challenges. And by that I mean instead of just denying them or panicking every time something comes along. And therefore we can focus on our careers and our roles, and I don't mean just for the organisation, but for them, but also for the benefit of ourselves. So to have a process for our development planning, we need some key stages that we follow. And the first stage is review and reflect, and we've talked about that in our self-awareness. It's then about gathering evidence, and we've talked about that in self-awareness again, and in the feedback we can use. And then it's about reviewing that evidence and reflecting on it as part of our self-awareness. From that, we can decide on our objectives, and this is where we start recording stuff on our PDP. We can plan developmental activities based on our learning style and what opportunities we've got. We can review progression and reflect on our performance. So that's making judgments on what we've done, that experimentation, those concrete experiences, and we can record that on the PDP. And that's where it's really important that we're actually starting to record what we think about what's happened. And from that, we update our PDP and really start the cycle again. So let's have a look at that as a visual. So something visual for those visual learners. And as we can see, it's about establish a purpose and a direction, identifying the development needs to meet that direction, identifying the opportunities that we can, so whether there's some training, some coaching, whether we can job shadow with somebody, formulating actions about how we're going to go about it, undertaking that development, recording outcomes, and then back to review, reflect and evaluate, and from that establishing more purpose and direction where we want to go next and how we want to take it forward. So let's have a look at what our PDP will actually look like. This is just a template, as it explains in the guidance given. There's a template in the resource, there's a description of how to complete it, but also you may have one already as long as it sort of meets these criteria. But as you can see here, we're identifying what the developmental objective is. We're talking about priority. Is it something that's important to your job role now? Is it something that's critical? Is it something that could be there for future development, or is it just a personal development thing? What activities do you need to undertake to achieve the objective? So, are you going to have to go on a course? Is it going to be coaching? Are you going to job shadow? Is it just something you're going to do personally with some research? What support resources do you need to achieve that objective? It's about clearly identifying that. Otherwise, you could be at a situation where you're in the process of it and you haven't thought about what you need. So do you need to get anything? Do you need any funding? Do you need to ask anybody? Do you need to source any materials? What's your target date for achieving it? And then what's your actual date of achieving it? And that's just so we can look at for future planning, whether we've achieved it, whether we've made sure that we had enough time, did we leave enough time? And the really critical point, and the box at the end is probably not big enough, but we need to evaluate whether it was effective, whether it met the need, what difference has it made? So we're going back to that. Has it met that objective at the beginning? It's got a review date on there. It needs to be a rolling plan. So, this is just a template, but you may have to continually update it and go on to another page and sign in and dating it just to show that you've completed it and it's your own work, really. But it's a personal development plan, so it's between you and yourself, and it's about keeping up to date and looking at making yourself aware of what's coming. So 2 key areas in that personal development plan template we were just looking at that I'd just like to focus on before we move ahead. And the first is what support or resources are going to be needed. Big questions. What could you use? What methods could you use? And what's available to you within the workplace. And these can really be split into 2 areas. And one is formal. So coaching, workbooks, mentoring, online learning, work shadowing, training courses, and then journals there, which can fall into formal or informal, depending on if it's something organised by the organisation that's done professionally, say, or if it's just a personal one, it could be informal. And informal could be anything really, from reading, conferences, visits you've attended, so your reflections on them, some research you've done that you've used, networking with other managers or with other organisations, observations of things you've seen, things you've watched. It's really limitless, the informal side, as long as you can show some form of reflection following that sort of cold process that you've taken it through. So methods, many of them, it's about making sure you detail it correctly within your plan, and it's also about knowing what works for you and what's available in your organisation. And we'll look at that in the next slide, which is about an activity I want you to do. Following on from methods, we're going to do a little activity now, and the activity asks you to think about the methods. We've just listed some. You might want to research those further if you're not sure about them, or you might want to come up with some of your own that you've experienced, but you need to look at what's best for you. your situation in your workplace, your maturity, perhaps your role, and suits your learning style. You know, it might be coaching that you prefer, but it may not be available to you. And then you might want to do a course, but you don't feel you have the time, or you don't like courses. So think about what's best for you, and then consider what is available to you within your organization. You want to make notes, because a little hint here, in your end of unit assignment you'll be asked to evaluate 3 methods, so these notes will be useful for you to go back on. So there's a worksheet for you to use. Make some notes about the best methods for you to fit your situation, your learning style, your role, and then consider what is available to you in your organization. So that's the material for this unit complete. What's next? Well, there is another session after this, and that's just details on the unit assignment. It's a 2-part assignment with 6 tasks, so it's quite substantial, and there's going to need to be some research with all the notes you've taken and with the activities you've done. There's also some guidance in there, and take note on it about researching and referencing and citing. You're going to have to reference or cite any research that you've used. There is no word count, but as I've already said, it's expected to be a substantial piece of work, and ensure that you consider the command verbs. There's some resources and guidance in the next session around this, but we're talking here about where it says evaluate. Make sure you are evaluating. The guidance gives examples, tells you what each word is meaning. You're also going to be asked to start a PDP at this stage, so you've got a template there, or you can use one from your workplace, but you need to start a PDP. You've surely got some areas from the material we've done already of things you think you can improve on, things you think you can develop. We've now talked about some methods. You're going to be researching them. You can add those into it. Keep updating that throughout the qualification. If you keep that running throughout the qualification, it'll be useful, because at the end you'll be holding a professional discussion where you'll be discussing what you've done as part of your personal development as you've gone through the qualification. And also at this stage it'd be useful to start a reflective journal, and there's some guidance in the resources about how you go about that. Now that's a personal choice about how you record it, but the guidance gives you some sort of idea about the sorts of things that you should be putting in there. And there's also it'll help you with the training hours that you have to record as well. So those bits and pieces you have to record about the 20% of your time you've spent doing stuff for your qualification, and also it'll help you with information to reflect on and go back to when you have to do that discussion around your personal development, because you'll have written down things. The problem is when we get to the end and we have to talk about it, we can't remember what we did and how we went about it. If you've kept a reflective journal, you'll really refer back to that and use that as part of your endpoint assessment in the professional discussion. So have a look at the assignment. Any questions, come back to me.